Hey guys, good morning. Happy Monday. I hope you are starting your week off with at least a strong cup of coffee, if nothing else. I have my tea here. So, we are coming into the home stretch of our adulting countdown, and we have some awesome content set up for you. And today, I'm going to talk about something that every single woman experiences. Well, almost every single woman experiences in a really similar way, our hormonal cycle. And this is literally probably the primary influencing factor on our mood. Um, and it happens every single month. And it's pretty knowable. There's a lot of information out there about it. However, I was not taught about my hormone cycle. Were you guys? I'm curious. I have no idea why health class would not cover essentially the most foundational aspect of women's health that influences everything from our fertility to our mood to when we're having our period to cramps to our mental sharpness, everything. Once you learn about it, you cannot go back. All right, so what am I talking about? So our hormonal cycle is what follows our menstrual cycle. So a cycle is generally about 28 days. Some people are longer, some people are shorter. It follows the moon cycle. So it's essentially in a month, the moon becomes full once, there's a new moon once. So some people like to chart kind of their periods to their moon. A lot of women have their period on a new moon or on a full moon, just based on kind of the gravitational pull of a planet, and the fact that we are liquid primarily. So we are influenced by the moon and the planets. Not talking about planets today. But we are talking about hormones, and there are three main hormones that we need to understand and know are at play in our body at all times: estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Okay, and each of these three have a different impact in our body. And this is, okay, I'm not a medical doctor, I should say. Nothing that I say here is like a recommendation for how to do things physically for your body, but I am going to share the information that is widely available about our hormone levels and how they impact our mood throughout our cycle. So, the three, estrogen. I think of estrogen as like the happy hormone. Estrogen, when estrogen is high, everything is good. Life is good, your energy's high, just like rose-colored glasses. Things don't really bug you as much as they might otherwise. Progesterone, I think of as like the chill, cozy, somewhat introverted hormone. So it definitely raises our mood, but estrogen is a little bit more outgoing. Progesterone is a little bit more inward focused. And then testosterone is maybe like you could imagine. It's really driven. It is a little bit more like there's more of a drive. I already said driven. There's more drive. There's slightly more focus. It can be a little bit more aggressive, whether you want to see that in a positive or a negative light. But those are the three that are primarily working in our bodies at any point in time. And they change throughout our cycle in a relatively predictable way. So if you want to understand, like, why am I feeling so sleepy? Why am I so irritable? Why am I so happy and energized? If you know where you're at in your cycle, you can actually like prepare ahead of time or even plan your week. So for example, when I'm approaching my period, I have this routine of like, this is when I spend time with women friends. And this is really important for me to maintain my mental health as my estrogen and progesterone are plummeting. So I'll make sure I have a girlfriend date. Or if my estrogen is really high, I know that I'm going to feel really outgoing. That's when everything kind of physically is its brightest and most enlivened. So maybe I'll have a date night with my boyfriend. So there are things that you can plan around knowing your cycle. And it can help you to communicate to somebody else of like, hey, I know that my period's coming up. I know that my hormones are super low right now. Like, I just need a minute. Like, let me have a day to myself. So this is just going to help you navigate your life. Protect yourself from, not protect yourself, but like arm yourself with knowledge so you can have more self-awareness and understanding of what's happening in your body and how that's influencing your personality and your mood. Okay, so I'm going to talk week 1, 2, 3, 4. And week 1 is when you have your period. I always thought week 1 was like the week after your period for some reason, but in most hormonal cycle calendars, week 1 is when you have your period. Week 2 is when you're coming out of your period and you're preparing to create an egg when you ovulate, when you're most fertile. Week 3 is when you are kind of coming off of, well, at the beginning of week 3, you release your egg. And then you're starting to kind of come off of that rise in hormones. And then week 4 is when you're preparing to get your period. So that's when the moodiness starts to come in. Okay, so what actually happens? In week 1, when we have our period, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone at the beginning of week 1 are at their lowest point. However, and so that could be an indicator of, okay, your mood, because estrogen is the happy one, remember? Progesterone is like the happy, cozy one, and testosterone is the driven one. They are all at the bottom of the chart. If there was a chart here, they're like low. So that's why on the first day of your period, especially, you might be feeling kind of in the dumps and like just you want to be turned inwards, taking care of yourself, resting. Amazing. Yes, that is exactly what your hormones would be telling you to do. From day one onwards, however, so day one of your cycle is actually the beginning of the end, because from that point on, your hormones are going to start to rise. So you might even on day 2 or 3 of your period be starting to feel a little bit lighter, a little bit happier, because your estrogen is rising, and so is your progesterone. Progesterone, hopefully I'm saying that word right. So from the first day of your period to the end of week 2, so first week you have your period, week 2 you're done with your period, your estrogen and progesterone are both rising, and they're essentially preparing your body to ovulate, which means you're going to be the most fertile. This is the time if you're trying to get pregnant, you would want to be getting pregnant. Okay, so at the end of week 2, that's when your estrogen, progesterone is highest. And at the end of week 2, beginning of week 3 is when you release your egg. And as soon as you release your egg, there's like a slight dip in both estrogen and progesterone, a little bit, like it goes down into a little valley, and actually testosterone kind of bumps up right there. So at the end of week 2, beginning of week 3, that's when you're going to be the most driven, most focused, most ambitious. So that is the time to like go out and get your goals, go out and make your presentations, go out and have the tough meetings, right? So week 2, end of week 2 into week 3. Week 2, week 3 is a good time to be really externally active. However, once your egg is released, so there's like a little dip, it comes back up, but then at the end of week 3 is when your hormones really start to drop again. So estrogen is coming down, progesterone's coming down, all from a long slide from mid-week 3 all the way down to the end of week 4, your hormones are dropping off, because now you're essentially repairing everything that's been happening inside of your uterus where you were creating your egg, and you're preparing for what's going to happen at the end of the month, i.e. week 1, where you shed your lining, okay? So at the end of week 4, beginning of week 1, we get back to the beginning of the cycle, and that's where all of our hormones are the lowest. So really, you can think of week 1 and week 2 as like your happy weeks. Like from the beginning of week 1, you're going up with all of your hormones, and your mood is improving and your energy is improving. End of week 2, beginning of week 3, you have that little testosterone boost. So you're like, okay, really going to go get them. And then starting through the mid of week 3 through the end of week 4, that's when all of your hormones are kind of tapering off. So you can also think of the beginning of your cycle as the more extroverted time. The first half, the second half is your more introverted time. If you're a business owner, the beginning of your cycle is more of like the planning, setting goals, and going out and getting them phase. The second half of your cycle is a little bit more of like doing the work, coming in, like hanging out in your office, making sure all the details are checked and you're doing everything really well, kind of on the inner workings of your business. And then at the beginning of your cycle, again, like the planning, planting the seeds, going out and getting those goals. So there are a lot of ways that you can use this knowledge of your cycle. And if you don't know where you're at in your cycle, I highly recommend tracking. So there are a lot of apps that you can use. There's one, I can put a few links in the comments if you're interested in this. There's one called Natural Cycles, which is probably the most intensive one that you can use to track. But there are tons of other ones, a lot of free ones where you can just input information on your own. So you can track your fluid, kind of like what type of fluid is being discharged, what your mood is like, even how your brain is feeling, like how awake and alive and attentive you're feeling. And then also, of course, if you get your period, when you get your period, what does the blood look like? How long do you bleed for? All those types of things. And as time goes on, I know you're going to start to just understand your cycle better and intuitively know where you're at in your cycle. And it's really cool when you can wake up and be like, oh, I think I'm going to ovulate today. How cool is that? I mean, depending on who you are, you might not think that's that cool, but I think that's amazing and one of our superpowers as women that women uniquely have. So I hope that was helpful. I hope I didn't butcher any of those words. I hope that was relatively clear. Again, I'm not a doctor, not a scientist. This is just available information that I myself have wanted to educate myself on, and I hope it is useful for you. All right, guys, have a great week ahead. Bye.